Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Political Pigpen. I'm your host, as always, the Politicrat. And tonight, we're going to be talking about Conservative Inc., aka the BoomerCons. Ones who, uh, we'll define them later, but let's just say the BoomerCons have been a major presence in our society for the past. What is it now? I don't know. I don't even know when you could when you could like. It's like they have no beginning and they have no end. It's like really infinite. Anyway, so before we get on to that topic, we have some guests here tonight with us, and we are also we have two more who are coming, and they're going to be a bit late, but I think they'll be able to give us some insight on the topic as well. But okay, so everybody, let's start by introducing yourselves. Let's start with you, Grayson. How are you doing tonight? Welcome back. Grayson?
If you want, I can go and introduce myself.
Yeah, what's going on? Lacora, I think he's gone. Anyway, okay, Chicago.
All right. Well,
yeah, you do that.
Hello, everyone. My name's Chicago Liberal. You might know me from Twitter for starting up really volatile arguments with the rest of Liberty Twitter all the time because it's fun. I'm also the co-host of the Current Crusade podcast with my good friend British Knight, and I think I'm the only one here who identifies as an old right person when it comes to politics.
Okay.
And also, Politicast, to go and answer your inquiry on when Conservative Inc. started, I would go and start it with Robert Taft losing the presidential primary for the Republicans in 1952.
Okay. We will talk about that in a little bit because I am interested to hear more about that. But anyway, Lacorum, are you there?
Yep.
All right. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm nobody. You might have seen me around. I'm a post-localist. I suppose you could call me. Yeah, I don't know. Just I'm a progressive generally. So
All right. So, everybody. So what are your Grace? Okay, Grayson, you're here. Would you like to introduce yourself? This is your second time coming back, I believe.
Actually, the third.
Third?
I believe third time I was here.
Okay, yeah. All right. Would you like to go and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Grayson. I don't know what I would really call myself because every time I take the political compass, I get the same center right thing, but I still don't know what I actually call myself. I guess liberal conservative is the key, but
okay. Anyway, so what is everybody's thoughts on? Let's just start simple. What is everybody's thoughts on Republicans or conservatives or whatever? I mean, I was thinking we have a completely separate episode where kind of like the one where we have another person coming. Welcome back again to the stream.
Hello.
How are you doing today? Keeping America great?
Yes.
Right.
President Donald Trump has been let out of the fucking hospital. We're amazing.
Yeah, I actually don't think. Like I don't think he can. I mean, I don't want this to be the conversation, but I honestly don't think he's over it yet.
No, that's fair.
I mean, it just seems like you don't just. It wasn't even 3 days. That, or what if it was like a publicity stunt? That would be hilarious.
Here's the thing, Politicrat. It doesn't matter if he's over it or not because it looks like he's back at work, and that's what people care about: the president's being back.
True. Yeah. Anyway, so Damnation, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Damnation 3. I am effectively what would be called a classical liberal with a dash of some lefty populism built into it too, in regards to like social issues. and some fiscal conservatism. So like you're talking to the enlightened radical alt centrist.
Yeah.
Jesus H. Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so, oh, whoa, there he is. Okay, we have our final guest. We have how are you doing tonight, Outremer? Are you sailing across to the Holy Land?
Yeah, sure. You doing all right, dude?
Anyway, so yeah, so tonight's stream is about Conservative Inc. and the BoomerCons, and we also the BoomerCon revolution, the future of the BoomerCons, BoomerCon cringe, just anything that has to do with Conservative Inc. and their inner workings, their influence or lack thereof, and what their purpose for existing even is to begin with.
Sure.
So who wants to start off here? I'm guessing this is going to have to be a little bit more controlled. So do you want to like give 4 minutes or have somebody explain it, or?
No, I'll control. Let's go. I have a timer here. So, yeah, let's start. So Chicago, you were about to give some background on the history of the modern conservative establishment. You said you theorized that it began with Taft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the modern establishment per se. It's just Conservative Inc. in general, and where it started. Because I pinpoint where it started with the beginnings of the Eisenhower administration and the rejection of the old right caucuses of the Republican Party in the 1950s. So moving away from the hyper pro-free markets, isolationist views of the old right, and instead towards the still pro-free market, but not as much, somewhat pro-New Deal and pro-interventionist stance of the neocons.
Okay, but what would you consider those who were still economically on the right, like not the Eisenhower types, but those like, for instance, Goldwater? Because you had Murray Rothbard. Rothbard did not consider Goldwater to be a part of the old right, but I think the only reason, like policy-wise, I think he definitely was. But I think the main reason that he did not consider him part of the old right was the time in which his rise occurred, and because he was associated with William F. Buckley.
Sorry, which person are you talking about?
I was talking about Barry Goldwater.
Goldwater, he somewhat is part of the old right because he's really the last stand of that worldview. But at the same time, he was super pro-interventionist. So in reality, he's somewhat part of the tradition of the old right, but really he should be considered part of the conservative wing of the new right.
Okay. Or what about like the libertarian wing of the new right?
Yeah. Although
Okay.
the old right actually is where Murray Rothbard got a lot of his ideas for what eventually became anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah. Can you? You're an anarcho-capitalist. Can you go in and explain how that is?
Well, basically, Murray Rothbard took a lot of teachings from different old rights authors, particularly H.L. Mencken, and you could consider Ludwig von Mises part of that tradition as well, even though he's more of the European tradition from the Austrian school. And then basically synthesize all of that with adding in touches of anarchism from the likes of Lysander Spooner.
Oh, so is it like a Hegelian dialectic between all of these things?
No.
I was gonna say we're gonna
Spooner
talk about
is not really a leftist at all.
If we're gonna go off the Hegelian dialectic,
Because if you ask me, leftists do not make corporations to try and take on the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, no, that's no, but is that But yeah, so Chicago just. Okay, actually continue Chicago. Like, you give us the history. You give us you construct the meta narrative, but don't deconstruct it. Don't be a postmodernist.
You know me. Anything with the word modernist in it, I don't like immediately.
What about early modernists, like 1600s?
That's
Anyway,
tradition.
okay,
that ain't
continue with
modernism.
continue with what you're saying.
Well, I pretty much said my piece on what I think of Murray Rothbard and the like, and I think I should go and let other people talk for now.
Okay. All right. Alfremer, let's have you go next. I mean, you yourself, you said you've been involved in Republican politics for quite some time. So you've been up.
So like, I'm going to drop some videos that sort of explain the split in the Republican Party that's going on right now. Can you guys hear me? Check one, check
Yeah,
one.
absolutely.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
All right. I just had to move to a better spot real quick, so I got a better internet connection, so you guys aren't roboting on my line. All right, guys. Here's the skinny. The Republican. This is going to sound fucking crazy. I don't know how much you guys really know, but the Republican or right-wing movement in the United States has never really existed, in my opinion. Now, I'm coming at this from a reactionary perspective. I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who's on the far right. But the United States has always been an Enlightenment nation. I mean, it was founded out of modernism. It was the first nation that really got going with these ideas. If you go back to the Enlightenment, if you go back, which was itself the left-wing progressive movement of its time, the United States in many ways was on the frontier of this. It was now the brilliance of the founding fathers, and I'm not one of these guys who sort of worships the founding fathers, even though I'm descended from one of them. The brilliance of the founding fathers is that they took a lot of the reactionary and right-wing arguments into account when they were carving out the system of government, which is what really distinguishes them from the French Revolution. Now, I'm not one of these sort of PragerU.
We're going to get to PragerU later.
We're going to get PragerU, but I'm not one of these sort of Hillsdale PragerU retro types who's just like, oh, the founding fathers, they're brilliant. And they were very flawed. A lot of them were sort of Alex Jonesian style conspiracy theorists, but and they were deeply flawed individuals, but they were also highly intellectual, and they more or less won a war and were able to define the nation, not fully tabula rasa, but more or less along the lines that they wanted. Now, within the right-wing movement, here's the issue. They never, once you sort of understand a lot of the issues with modernism, a lot of the issues with the Enlightenment, there are very serious questions that start emerging about tradition, about culture, about human social organization. The United States has never really dealt with that. And the problem with the political right in the United States is that there's always been this tension. Now, the political left in the country has always more or less been unified around this narrative of civil rights going forward, particularly from 1861 onwards. The political right in this country has always been bifurcated. And this is where the split between right-wingers and conservatives comes in. Now, where does the note now? I'm not. That's more or less the sort of the historical background. But going forward from that, what is Conservative Inc.? Well, what is Boomer Inc.? Conservative Inc. is the sort of corporatized Republican Party. It's the George W. Bush party, not the Donald Trump 2016 populist party. It's the party of the neoconservatives are the most visible elements, the most visible ideological faction of Conservative Inc. Now, I'm going to drop a couple of videos explaining where the split has come from. But if you guys, I know that I had to drop out there for a second, but I know one of the guys mentioned Dwight Eisenhower's presidency. The sort of like the political right in the country was never sort of fully unified. But where this really comes in, when it really sort of comes into its full manifestation, was in the post-New Deal era. Now, I personally consider FDR to have been a dictator and an autocrat.
Oh, he was the United States' first dictator for life.
Well, I would have said he was the third American dictator, or the third figure who could be legitimately considered an autocrat.
Well, I said dictator for life.
Oh, okay. But
it's technically true.
But what you have to understand is that from the 1920s to from the 20s to the 50s, the conservative movement, the Republican Party, was dealing with the legacy of the post-New Deal era. Everybody was like, okay, what are we going to do about the New Deal? What are we going to do about the Constitution? How are we going to actually balance political liberty with all of this, with industrialization? Are we going to try, although they didn't say this explicitly, basically the sort of like, and of course the sort of thing was like, what are we going to do about all these fucking communists in the State Department? If you read one of the great books that sort of covers this is Eugene Lyons's The Red Decade. Everybody who was fucking cool in the 20s to the 40s was a straight up Bolshevik. And I mean, this is not controversial anymore. Michael Malice talks about this over on his podcast channel about how the New York Times, because they had card-carrying members of the USCCP in the State Department, covered up the Holodomor on behalf of Joe Stalin. And so you get these figures out of the paleo-conservative movement like Joe McCarthy, but also figures out of sort of the working class Democratic Party movement. I forget the name. Who is the actual head of the House on Un-American Activities Committee?
Was it McCarthy? I don't know.
It was not McCarthy. McCarthy was the figure who was later identified by this, but it was not McCarthy who was specifically that, because what was McCarthy? McCarthy was a
Yeah, and also
senator.
keep in mind that McCarthy was a senator. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. McCarthy.
that's right. Okay,
He was not a member of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, he was a senator. What am I thinking?
Yeah, that's so basically like essentially what you've got going into the 1950s is a conservative movement that is not necessarily isolationist, but is certainly Jacksonian in terms of the lion's share of its public support. And what this leads to is a bifurcation within the party. Essentially what you've got going, and again, I'm dropping these into the private chat. I don't know if you guys can see this, but these are basically videos that sort of explain where the reemergence of the split within the Republican Party is really getting down to brass tacks. But going into the 1950s, there's the split in the Republican Party between factions that want to go back to something equivalent to sort of Jacksonian pre-New Deal conservatism. They want to withdraw from the war, and what will eventually become the neocons. And the two figures who really embody this is in the run-up to the election, I want to say in '52. Is Dwight Eisenhower, who represents the sort of new conservatives, the post-New Deal conservatives. He was brought into it. You look at his political history, he was FDR's favorite general. He was brought into the conservative movement. He was openly in favor of centralization. He was a total wet. He was in favor of the New Deal reforms. And I want to say it was Robert Taft, who was an isolationist.
Was he an isolationist, or was he
Yeah,
just a non-interventionist?
He was.
Robert Taft was a straight up isolationist. He actually was opposed to even entering the Second World War until Pearl Harbor was bombed and the Philippines was invaded.
I mean, a lot of people were like that too.
But it was the general understanding.
Taft was even more radical than that.
Well, they wouldn't say that. Again, people wouldn't speak about this, but that goes back to World War I. That goes back to what the Wilson administration did in order to get us into that war. And although it wasn't widely understood by the American population, if you start taking a look at some of the more inconvenient facts about the narratives that were used to push the U.S. into World War I.
Yeah, like the sinking of was it the Carpathia? Or
No,
was
the Lusitania.
Lusitania.
We won't go too deep. We won't go too deep into those territories. But your audience or the people listening in can take a look at the kinds of things that were done and the kinds of things that the Wilson administration was doing to essentially create a police state. I'm not one of these, the leftists are the real fascists, but it is a fact. If Jonah Goldberg wrote this whole book,
Liberal fascist. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's cringy, but he does.
No, because the thing is, I think I was taking a look at it, and I thought the book was going to be completely different than it actually was. I thought it was basically going to be like the liberals are fascists.
Yeah,
they're the left. No, but apparently it wasn't even arguing that fascism is. I thought it was going to be like an argument for why fascism is left wing.
Yeah, and but what he does have like some of that mixed in there. But if you actually go through that book, what it's really about is the history of really these totalitarian movements that have just been completely airbrushed out of American history from the early 20th century, like straight up police states, straight up hit squads, straight up like the murderousness. I know Murray Ann Rothbard, and there's many other books that cover this, the sort of split within the right wing. I want to say it was James Foucault's Reclaiming the American Right, Murray Ann Rothbard's magnum opus, The Betrayal of the American Right, as well as his other book.
That is a fantastic book. He talks exactly.
He talks exactly the kinds of Machiavelli, like you read this shit, it's like straight up Game of Thrones American style.
Yeah, no, and then it's very funny too. I found it really funny, like at the end of the book, where he's like, fuck the right. I'm identifying as a left-wing Democrat now who believes that. It was just like, it was funny in the book. He was like, then I realized I'm a left-wing Democrat.
Yeah, he is, because libertarianism agrees epistemologically with progressivism, but that's a whole other conversation. I don't blame libertarians for that.
Until you get to Hoppe, then it really doesn't.
No.
You get what I'm saying. You got to go in a specific direction if you want to get to right-wing liberalism. You got to go towards Burke. You got to go towards Hoppe, which is what Murray Ann Rothbard sort of discovered as he was going through the history of these political movements. He was just like, you could tell he was having like a Curtis Yarvin moment where he's just like, holy shit.
He was a bit of a butterfly when it came to political.
I wouldn't say he was a butterfly. I would say he's one of he was
a pragmatist. He believed in coalition building.
I think he's one of these guys. He's another one of these guys who was born before the age of the internet, before the age of like being able to instantaneously check all of this stuff and start piecing together what's really going on. You could see this in the writings of figures like Vilfredo Pareto. You could see this in the writings of figures like James Burnham. There are all these guys.
My avatar tonight.
There are all these guys over the last 75 to 100 years who recognize that, their classical Buckleyite conservative worldview was not matching up with the way the current political order actually works. And then when they start digging into the history and going back and reading the books, some of their takes are cringy, some of their takes are off, some of them, some of them are at least half right. But what you really start to understand is that they're trying to piece together how we got to this point, but they don't have the resources that we have today. Now, I dropped a couple of videos that sort of explain the split going on within the Republican coalition right now.
Which one would you recommend? I think we could play one of them. Oh, should we play Closington's?
I think Closington, so you can go ahead and play his video.
No, I was just like, yeah, we can do, unless if there's a more like.
One of them sort of explains the rise of Nick Fuentes, but it's also, and Nick Fuentes is at the center of a lot of this, but it also explains, by contrast, the reason why Nick Fuentes exists. Now, I personally don't like Nick Fuentes. I met him in person at CPAC, but it explains where the Nick Fuentes phenomenon is coming from. It explains where the Groyper phenomena is coming from. It explains where all of these sort of young people who've been doing their homework online and are discovering that Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire crew, and I know Distributist really talked about this during his video covering the Covington Catholic scandal. I can drop that into the chat if you guys want to go look at this. Ben Shapiro lied about this when he did that Stanford speech against Nick Fuentes. Ben Shapiro, now I've met Ben, but he lied about this. He straight up looked 50,000 people in the eye a week after the Groyper phenomenon started last year. The Groyper Wars started, and he stated that he did not actually come out against the Covington Catholic kids. He said that this was a total lie. We have him on video doing this. We have his tweets. And figures like Vincent James, and all these other right-wingers that have been censored off the internet, or at least they've been censored off of mainstream platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, were just sharing this stuff around on Instagram. They were sharing this stuff around on BitChute, So there is a recognition that the mainstream right is, Curtis Yarvin said it best, they are sort of behaving as the outer party to the Democratic Party's inner party. They only engage with politics through a dialectic that is fundamentally controlled by the progressive movement within the United States. Or to put it more simply, Conservative Inc. is the outer party to liberalism's inner party. They are progressives driving the speed limit, as Michael Malice infamously says. Now, how to steelman this? You can make the argument, the neoconservative argument, that after the New Deal, you were never going to get rid of the New Deal reforms, that they were baked into the American experiment, that we were living in a new regime. You can also make the argument, sort of Mitch McConnell, Newt Gingrich argument, that constantly staying just to the right of the Democratic Party is a good way of staying in politics, or at least staying in power. You know what I mean? It's a way of staying viable as a party. The problem is that it's not fundamentally. If you're doing that, then you're basically accepting the premise that the United States is already a one-party state. It's just
it basically is.
I mean, well,
actually,
that's
okay,
the thing.
so
But that's the thing. That's the thing is that I agree with you. I think we are a one-party state. But that's not what's being sold to the American people. That's not what's being sold to the Trump voter base. That's not what's being sold to all of these people who are looking for some kind of real option, who understand that something's gone terribly wrong with the American experiment.
So now, thanks for giving us that perspective. That's not something that I've necessarily considered before. I mean, personally, I don't 100% agree. But I think that in regards at least to...
There's one more element. Can I cover real quick?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Now, where does the rubber hit the road with these guys? Now, there are certain elements that Conservative Inc. will not touch. They were willing to touch it 5 years ago. You can go back and you can look at videos of Ben Shapiro and Andrew Klavan and Michael Knowles talking about demographics 5 years ago. But they will not touch that subject today. Why won't they touch it? I suspect the reason that changed, the reason that they won't touch that subject today, they won't talk about immigration in the way that they were talking about it 5 years ago in 2014.
Wasn't Ben Shapiro open borders though, or something?
He's not open borders, but he has changed his tune. He will not talk explicitly about demographics and how they play out in electoral politics in the United States. The reason he won't talk about that is because I suspect he and the other elements of what we sort of colloquially refer to as Conservative Inc., they understand that they no longer have absolute control over the dialectic. In other words, 5 years ago, they thought that they could control the conclusions that their base was going to come to in turn when they spoke about dangerous subjects like demographics, when they spoke about things like crime in the inner cities, when they spoke about these highly racialized issues in the United States. They believed that they could control the metrics and the conclusions that their base would come to, that their base was not smart enough to come to other conclusions just by looking into these issues themselves.
Well, those other conclusions are just flat out wrong.
Well, we can debate those conclusions, but but I suspect the reason why the reason why Con Inc. does not want to talk about those subjects anymore is because, quite frankly, they know that they can't control the dialectic anymore.
But it's not even that; it's a racist fucking tune.
Okay, well, you and I can go ahead. And,
yeah.
you and I can go.
Who cares?
I don't know who's talking about that right now, but that's not even what I'm essentially debating right now. I'm simply pointing out, if you're saying that it's a racist fucking tune, then by your own logic, Ben Shapiro deserves to be canceled because they spoke about these issues 5 years ago in exactly the same way that people outside of Conservative Inc. are currently bringing it. All of the people involved.
Right, and I don't disagree with you. The idea behind that was to bring up the to ask the question, right? What ended up happening though was it was a tool used by the left to then throw and group all of the other people that would be considered mainstream conservative and group them together with the actual racists, right? And then they labeled them as alt-right, which then they labeled the alt-right as Nazis.
I see what you're saying. You're saying okay. I thought you were attacking my point. I thought that you're saying that essentially the Con Incs. basically bent the knee on the issue because they knew they were going to get called racists if they keep
right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
I agree. I agree that that's an element of it, but I think that the real reason, but the thing is that they're willing to talk about other issues. See, the thing that gives it away for me is that they're still willing to talk about other issues that get them called racist, but they're not willing to talk about that issue. The reason they're not, there's very specific issues Con Inc. will no longer touch. And the commonality between those issues is that those issues affect their base very explicitly. They will they don't affect the progressives because the progressive wing still has control of the dialectic. And I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but the commonality that I've noticed is that they don't want to talk about those issues because it immediately calls into question their legitimacy as a right-wing movement in the United States.
You're absolutely correct, because because there are elements that glam onto those. Because I've actually seen the same studies that you're talking about and the demographics behind it. There are some real things that need to be considered about the Democrats and the left importing immigrants into the country to flip the demographics to make it vote blue, right? But
I don't think that's I don't think that's really the reason they're importing.
There's many different
that's
reasons.
one of the main ones. That's one of the
We're
main
talking
ones.
about there's many different reasons why this is occurring, but I want to keep this conversation sort of focused in on conservative ink. We can discuss a lot of the issues that are driving the wedge in the Republican Party a little bit later, but I agree with Damnos's point there.
Okay. How about you? Any of you other guys? Grayson, you said you identify. So I don't know if you'd fall into the movement conservative/conservative Inc. camp, but you said you're to the right of center. How would you assess this? Would you say you fall in kind of with them? If so, what are your observations? And also, what are your thoughts on what Alframer was saying?
I do not believe I fall in with conservative Inc. because I'm technically only considered center-right by the political compass standards, so...
Okay.
But I'm not at all aligned with conservative Inc. I mean, I just think that they're too much... They just won't go into social conservative issues that much unless they're popular, like... Yeah, they'll talk about abortion because that's the one issue in the United States, social issue in the United States that hasn't been sprung so far to the left.
Yeah, that's the one issue that I still think that that the right is going to lose on abortion. Like, I pretty much think it's deterministic.
It's like I've been inside some of these youth wings. It's already a 50-50 split. They're going to cuck on abortion. Like, don't give it yet. Like the proposition that Roe v. Wade is actually going to be repealed by a conservative Supreme Court.
No, because they stick to precedent. That's the thing.
Well, it's not just that.
It's not even that. Like there's actually a legitimate argument that rings true, which is body autonomy, right? And you have to make some weird arguments to rip that away.
Yeah, like I know, Outramer, you and I would totally. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail on my stance on this, but you and I would totally disagree on this. But I personally see it as a property rights issue. You own your body, you own your womb. Therefore, because technically a fetus is parasitical, and I think until, like, for instance, until the last term, or the late term, I think that you should be able to eject.
It's not so much the issue that we're debating here. I don't want to get us tied down in these issues because that we're not debating about the issues. You and I can debate abortion until the cows come home. The point is that this movement, this right-wing movement, staked its credibility on its opposition to Roe v. Wade. Now, I would say that we can debate whether or not Roe v. Wade is legitimate. We can debate whether or not Roe v. Wade was actually serves as a case of first precedent. We can debate the moral and ethical implications of abortion all day long. I'm naturally coming at this from a more Catholic perspective, but that's not the issue. The issue is the credibility of this movement, which for 50 fucking years ran on
hammered down
the issue that we're going to draw this trench line that none shall pass, and then
they've done that for absolutely everything.
I know I agree with you. They have done that, and that's the issue. The issue is that they keep essentially going further to the left on these issues. They keep essentially and what's the point of essentially having a right-wing movement that at a fundamental level is not even like Distributist made a really great live stream about this where he was responding to Don the Pleb the other day. And he basically, if anybody hasn't seen it, I highly recommend you guys go watch it. He's just straight spitting bullets at the things that the right wing gets wrong and about how we need to fundamentally reconsider this. The left can straight up call for the lynching of your children and not be punished by the cultural institutions of the United States.
Do you really think that would be the case? I mean, I can see the argument.
That was the whole Covington Catholic scandal. The whole Covington Catholic scandal.
Yeah. Okay. You're being metaphorical when you said. I thought you literally.
They literally called for someone to go out and lynch these kids. on Twitter.
And they straight up call, like, I can send you the videos that break this down. And conservative, not just Conservative Inc., but the archdiocese that sent these kids out there straight up turned on them for the first week. Now, those kids are okay. Nick Sandman walks away.
Oh,
as
he's a millionaire now.
But think of what would have happened if we didn't have the internet. Think of what would have happened if we didn't have those videos. Think of do you think those kids would have gotten justice? Do you think those kids
but the thing is, they wouldn't have even gotten in trouble because it wouldn't have gone viral.
No, it still would have gone viral. The whole point was that CNN and the mainstream media and all of these cultural institutions, all of these, MSNBC, NBC, they played this stuff nonstop for 48 hours straight.
Oh, it was longer than that.
They manufactured, and then it was going on for at least a week where you had straight up death threats about these kids. They would have been done. They would have been completely smoked.
And then because the videos came out, CNN got their dick caught in the fucking drawer.
Yeah.
Because it was like, oh God, we're wrong.
But the very similar thing happened a month later.
That you take away from that is that the real thing you take away from that is not that the left called for the mass lynching of kids. The real thing that you take away from that is, why didn't the right wing protect their people? Why didn't the right wing protect these kids who showed up for a right wing cause, the March for Life, and actually look after these people who put their necks and their livelihoods on the line for your movement? Why did you cuck? Why did you sell? Why did you quite literally throw your kids to a lynch mob?
Okay.
And they don't have
I think it was optics. I think it was all optics.
I think that it was, but
sometimes you can disregard. Like I am one of the people that actually kind of understands the idea that like optics sometimes plays a part, and sometimes you have to do a thing because the optics of it, and you have to assume a moral high ground that potentially doesn't exist, or you have to manufacture it to be able to smack down your own fucking opponents, right? Some issues you can actually take a fucking stand and slap everybody down with the proverbial baseball bat, saying, no, this is where we're going to draw the line. You're wrong, and fuck you for even trying it. And the Covington situation, I actually agree with you, Outraymer, is exactly where they should have said. They should have doubled the fuck down on that completely. And
they didn't. And they not only didn't, they lied about the fact that they didn't afterwards.
Yeah.
Now, I got to step away for about 5-10 minutes, but I'll be back. But I'll let some of the other guys get their voices in here.
Okay. All right. So I haven't heard from you really that much, Lacorum. Do you have anything you want to say? Because I think you're the furthest person to the left on this stream, so I guess
definitely.
Yeah. You said you're a social democrat, right?
Frankly, I'm more like a democratic socialist, even. But yeah.
Okay.
Big yikes.
Hey, Damnation used to be one of those.
Not necessarily. I was more of a social democrat, but
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We all have those phases.
Yep. Oh, I was an anarcho-communist there for like a couple years.
Okay, that's great. I never went that far. Okay, so I remember I had I did have a week-long communist phase when I was my freshman year of high school, but it wasn't because I actually believed in communism. It was because I thought the iconography looked cool, and I just put a bunch of like sickles and hammers on my locker. It was cringe in hindsight, very cringe.
The really entertaining part about the whole socialist movement, right, is
it's LARPing.
No, listen to this. And it was nailed to the wall by epic rap battles of history in the Che Guevara versus Guy Fawkes rap battle. Okay. When Guy Fawkes nailed Che Guevara with the fact that there's a bunch of capitalists that are selling T-shirts with Che Guevara's face on it, right? Like, fuck you and your stupid socialism bullshit. Capitalism wins because we'll just take your face and we'll sell it to you. That's it. That's how capitalism wins. I got a kick out of it.
That's interesting. I don't know. I never really watched epic rap battles. I know there was like an off-brand epic rap battles, I think, and it was between Keynes and Hayek.
The even better one is the Marx versus Mises one. That was actually really good too.
Okay.
That's called the March of History. That's
anyway,
actually really, really good. Sorry.
Anyway,
sorry to derail.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. But yeah, no. So Lacorum, so I have no idea where you're from, so I'm not going to ask you, just because I don't know if you feel comfortable with that. But in your where you are, assuming that you're not living in the U.S., what are the politics like in your country, like in terms of like right and left, in terms of establishment and all that?
Yeah, well, so I live in Australia, and
I figured. Okay.
yeah.
Don't call
I
him a
fi-
Kiwi.
I figured that, or New Zealand. Yeah, I figured Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I mean the ruling political party, the Liberal Nationalist Coalition, is basically what you would call the sort of conservative Inc. type thing. But yeah, I mean, clearly this discussion is mainly about like America, and I'm not particularly well versed on American history, but I actually, I mean, this is a sort of unusual position for what would be considered a leftist or whatever, but I actually agree with most of what Outreamer was saying.
Interesting.
So, yeah, sure. Yeah, all right. I'll just talk about Conservative Inc. then, I guess.
Like,
So,
do you guys have like a? Is there like a subsidiary of Conservative Inc. over in Australia, like an Australian subsidiary of the American multinational Conservative Inc.?
yeah, it's literally the Liberal Party, which
Okay.
is, I mean, it's called that because it's like classical liberal sort of, but yeah, they're like the, yeah, but so because implied by the term conservative Inc., I suppose you mean like the conservatives that only end up conserving corporate interests, basically.
Okay. Is that what they're mostly just trying to conserve over there?
Yeah, well, everywhere in the West, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, economically speaking. But then you have some right wing parties that care mostly about, like, for instance, like nationalism, immigration, social issues, like more thrown and altar parties, as opposed to my free.
That's an element. This is the thing I think you're missing, Politicrat. That is an element of right wing thought. It's not just about the GDP. There are social. There's a saying. It's Latin, and it's the motto of the state. I think of either Minnesota or Missouri. But it's Salus Templari Suprema Lex. The health of the people should be the highest law of the land. Now, that's not a socialist statement. That's a right-wing statement. It means that you look at the people.
I don't think it's either. I don't think you can really reduce it to left.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into like Roman politics, we are a little bit removed, but I'll grant you that. But it's about looking at the people. It's about making judgments. It's not all about it's not just about money. It's not about capitalism. It's not about the fucking GDP. This is like one of the memes that's been going around in these sort of Groyper wars. It's like the only thing that the Republican Party cares about is making those magic GDP numbers go up. Why does the Republican Party vote for mass immigration, or at least allow it? Because they essentially get paid off by special interest groups that support mass immigration because of economic concerns, and they make the economic argument. Why do the progressives support it? They support it because of demographics.
Okay, okay. So the thing is, okay, and here's actually what's interesting about mass immigration. This is why I think it's kind of funny why there are, and I feel like maybe it is a bit of a confusion. But it's not. But you have a lot of people on the right who oppose it, yet they are also pro-life, and their best chance to get Roe v. Wade overturned is to bring in.
You're not going to get me like you already know my stance. I'm actually in favor of some immigration, but that's not what we have today. Like that's not. I don't think now. I think that elements of the dissident right need to be making the moral argument against mass immigration. I just don't think that it's legitimate to be importing. You know, maybe it's because I'm Catholic and I have great sympathy for what's being done to these communities because I've been to a lot of them. But I just don't think that it's moral to be importing these people who have been completely fucked in Central America because of the U.S. addiction to narcotics and the drug wars that have torn these countries apart, importing them having them go on this hell journey where their kids get raped, and then
What do
putting
you
them
mean by importing that?
It's that, like, creating economic incentives by not enforcing border controls and by explicitly sending human rights organizations across the U.S. southern border, telling these people to go to the United States and ask for these human rights organizations, and that these human rights organizations will then grant them either with very, very little. Basically, these organizations will teach them how to game the U.S. immigration system so that they can then set up shop in the U.S., the golden land of opportunity. Then when they get here, they basically end up working dead-end service sector jobs at the lowest ends of society. So agricultural workers, construction workers, the sort of like typical stuff that Hispanics, Latinos, Chicanos, Tejanos, and Central Americans, are I'm not, getting into all of, again, it's a highly racialized issue, but they essentially get put into these service sector jobs where they get paid below minimum wage. You go to their communities and they're overrun with gangs. I've never been to a community where you can quite literally smell the intergenerational. It's a very particular smell when you walk into a place and you know that generation upon generation upon generation of poor people are basically living on top of each other. They have no prospects for the future. They have no prospects for getting out of this. A lot of them still don't have papers. They have no medical care. They have no help. They've been completely abandoned by, and the only thing that the fucking Democratic politicians care about, because that's the reason I go into these areas, they only show up once every couple of years to sort of do the rounds. Hey, don't forget to come out and vote for us. Republican politicians don't even bother going into these areas. They're just completely abandoned. It's like walking into, I sort of almost imagine this is like what it would have been to walk into like a Roman slave market 2,000 years ago.
Interesting.
It's so, and I can't.
You're not wrong about this.
I can't fucking be a part of this. It's just so, this is so evil, and it's so wrong to do this to people, let alone the fact that a lot of these people are Catholic like me.
Yeah.
Like,
A virtuous society should not allow that to happen, period.
Like who else? Like Joe Biden. He's Catholic.
well, yeah, and he's also pro-abortion, and he's also in favor of mass immigration, and he's totally this is like the whole, is Nancy Pelosi a true Catholic or not, or were the Kennedys true Catholics or not?
I think so I think the Kennedys probably were.
That's a bit of a tangent, though. So
Yeah, it's a second. Like, again,
speaking of which, speaking of taking it back, we can take this.
Once you start getting into the splits within American politics, there's so many interesting rabbit holes that you can go down. Like, there's so many interesting conversations.
Absolutely.
But I just don't want to get us like off on a 4-hour stream.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to really see, if you guys want actual physical proof, like balls to the wall legal documents that will show the split between what we call conservative Inc. and the paleo-conservative right as it existed in the 1960s, the thing that I say people have to go take a look at is the 1961 Ruther Memorandum. It was a memorandum that was published by the Kennedy administration with Richard Nixon as a supporter, and it also throws old Dwighty Eisenhower in there. Now, I like Ike, but I recognize what he was. It's basically a coordinated memorandum from which you might call the deep state, from the institutions that were established by the Roosevelt dictatorship, explaining.
I'd actually argue the deep state went back to.
We can argue where it comes from,
Wilson.
but that's not the point. That's the point. The point that I'm getting at is that this memorandum basically explains how they were going to deconstruct and destroy right-wing populist movements that were attempting to manifest themselves as basically anti-1960s movements. And basically, what this memorandum shows is that over the course of the 1960s, the reason why you didn't see any right-wing reaction to the various movements that exploded out of the 1960s is because they were explicitly suppressed. They were suppressed. They were targeted. Their funding was taken apart. They were systematically deconstructed by the state, and it's like something straight out of a George Orwell novel. It's incredible the way the state operates to protect.
I think it's going to be more like Aldous Huxley at this point, because it's going to be under the veneer.
What we're seeing today is that they can't hide it anymore. You could hide it back in the 1960s because we didn't have mass communications. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have sort of real-time coverage of a lot of these events. We didn't have the ability to instantly snap our fingers and bring up the statements from Ben Shapiro back when he condemned the Covington Catholic kids. We didn't have the ability to cross-check these people, in real time. You were more or less the victim of what the state told you. But because of mass communication, because of globalization, there's been fraying edges to those narratives. And that's part of the reason why I think you've seen this campaign tacitly supported by many conservatives over the last 4 years to try and recolonize the microphone. It's why they're not going to actually complain about certain elements of the right wing getting censored over the last 4 or 5 years, because they want to restore their position as the quote unquote legitimate spokesmen of the political right.
Thing is, okay, do you know what I've noticed though? And this is just right now, and I mean it's starting to like decrease in this regard. But you have the conservative, or no, I don't even want to say conservatives anymore. I'm just going to say the center right, who have control of our political and economic institutions, and then you have the left, who are currently in control of all the social and cultural institutions. And I think both sides are jealous that the other side holds the one that they do. Like, they'd probably rather switch if they had to choose.
Oh, I guess, but I mean, it's possible. But like again, if people really want to read about this stuff, the sort of stuff, the things that I recommend is Marianne Rothbard's Portrayal of the American Right. Go read up on the Ruther Memorandum. Go read up on James Foucault's The Reclaiming the American Right. Mark Levin has a book that sort of talks about a little bit of this, although he doesn't explicitly come out and say it. Because
okay, I don't think we should trust anything that he says, because he's part of the BoomerCon. BoomerCon industrial complex.
Very, very clear that there are people within the mainstream conservative movement that understand that this is a thing. It's very.
I know Jonah Goldberg does.
Yeah,
like he can actually be insightful. And
see, the thing is that they
George
all speak, what they do is they speak in code. They dance around the issue.
How do they speak in code?
I'll give you an example. It's very you just mentioned Jonah Goldberg. Jonah Goldberg has talked about demographics in the past. Jonah Goldberg has talked about a lot of the problems with the sexual revolution. Jonah Goldberg has talked a lot about the issues that were sort of on the mainstream conservative talking points back in the 60s and 70s. He doesn't talk about that explicitly anymore. He doesn't talk about that after his appearance on Jon Stewart. He doesn't talk about those issues explicitly, but he still implies that they're the case. Now, the reason he does that, I believe, is because he wants to stay within the Overton window of acceptable dialogue that's constantly moving further and further to the left. But
I wasn't even aware that it was like not appropriate just to talk about demographics. I mean, if you talk about,
yes.
I mean, if you racialize it.
Demographics. When you're talking about demographics, Politicrat, it's like policing and crime. It's like immigration. It's a highly racialized issue. You're going to run now. There's a way you can talk about it, and you can be mature, you can be sober, you can be judicious, you can be charitable. Mm-hmm. But when you're getting into this stuff, you know me, I don't like.
It's inherent. Like when you start bringing up the demographics, there is a section that use that information in a racist fashion to propagate a particular message.
It's
right?
It's like jumping up and down on a landmine.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly. Yeah.
It's now you can stay. It's like the landmine is not necessarily triggered to go off if you step on it. But if you start, do you really want to start doing a bunch of dumb shit with it?
Right. I'm just thinking of that scene in Hot Fuzz with the landmine.
You're absolutely correct on that. That's about what it's like. And it's like there, as Outreamer is talking about, there is a proper way to have the conversation and making sure that you do your best to insulate yourself. But some people aren't skilled enough to be able to have that conversation and dodge the pitfalls of having it. And which means that they open themselves up to the left, getting just hammering them in the fucking face while they're having the conversation. So sometimes they just don't even want to do it.
So the thing is that the left is woke on this. They know where conversations about demographics are going to lead. They know where conversations on race and crime are going to lead. They know where conversations on issues in the inner city are going to lead. They're going to lead at the bare minimum to a situation in which the political left does not is not, well, I'll put it in the most charitable terms. The progressive movement in the United States is not going to be seen in a favorable light.
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
bare minimum. So this is the reason why they always resort to that person's a Nazi, that person's a fascist, that person's a racist. We need to essentially go destroy that person because they're part of this brown movement rising up out of the hinterlands. They know that there's absolutely nothing to be gained by talking about demographics. They know that at worst, people will be convinced by it, or excuse me, at best, the two sides will more or less stay where they are. At worst, elements of your own side might be convinced by these arguments and essentially defect to the other side.
Yep.
There's nothing to be gained. But again, this is the fucking problem with the United States is the entire conversation about politics that we're having is truncated. It's like we're showing up to a court case where only the prosecution gets to speak and where only half the facts get to be presented. We can't talk about any of the fundamental issues about why the American university system is falling apart, why our inner cities are collapsing, why the infrastructure is not working, why we have all of these corporations going woke. It's because the entire dialectic in the West is totally truncated because because of the narrative.
No, that's not the thing. It's not because of the narrative. It's because there is no narrative.
There is a narrative.
No, there absolutely is a narrative.
There's no, but the narrative is that there is no narrative. That's the thing, because postmodernism.
That's not true at all, man.
I agree.
That's 100% not true that there isn't a narrative, right? Like you have to start looking through like the ideas of there's multiple sources of where all of this comes together to where you get like the far left and the far right from, right? What you end up with is you start going through you go through Hegelian dialectics and I
have Hegel's philosophy of history sitting right next to me on the table.
And what you end up with, right, is then you add in it's like there's a couple different other philosophers that are along that, and basically then like the last thing that you do is you shove in postmodernism, right, which then is like the veneer to finish it off, and that's where you get the progressive fucking movement from, right?
However, I think that I don't think that there has quite. I think we're starting to see it, but postmodernism and like the Frankfurt School. Mm-hmm. They have not yet. I don't want to use the term cultural Marxism.
Because fuck that! No, that's exactly what it is. It's cultural Marxism, right?
I think this is something that Damnation and I will actually disagree on.
Yeah.
I don't think postmodernism is this. This is a big thing that figures like Ray Mirasame or the cuck philosophy or the bread tubers will disagree with you on if you're talking about this in this way. Postmodernism is not so much a conspiracy; it's more like a condition. Now, I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
No, the thing is, we're currently in a state.
Let him finish. Let Outrimer finish.
Now, I agree. Postmodernism has been used cynically by the left over the course of the last 50 to 75 years. And this was the recognition of figures like Nick Land. If you really take postmodernism seriously, if you really take the sort of Nietzschean worldview seriously, then there's no reason why you can't deconstruct sacred cows like liberalism and anti-racism with postmodern political theory. Again, the progressive worldview, the values incumbent within progressives and within left-wingers and even within neoliberals, those all become fair game if you take postmodernism to its natural intellectual conclusions.
Yes.
If you take postmodernism as an actual condition that we increasingly find ourselves in. And I think the left understands this. They understand at a core basis that they've been using this philosophy and the philosophical conditions around it cynically. This is the sort of bullshit artistry of figures like Michel Foucault. Foucault is not a bullshit artist because he lied.
Okay, I actually kind of have a soft spot for Foucault, but he's
Foucault is the next chain in the step from Hegel to progressives.
Foucault's a bullshit artist, not because he's not the next legitimate chain, the next legitimate step in the chain from his bullshit doesn't come from the fact that doesn't come from the fact that he's not intellectually consistent in the process of modernism to postmodernism. His bullshit artistry comes in the fact that he still has certain sacred cows that he wanted to push.
Yeah.
Like he's not being philosophically consistent. It's to put this in a certain way, it's like claiming to be an anarchist while at the same time supporting a strong centralized government.
So like all anarchists.
Well, I mean, again, you get the point though. What he actually says his philosophy is, and what he actually practiced in terms of his personal politics. And this is true with, a lot of postmodern political theorists. This is true with a lot of theorists that came out of things like queer theory and the LGBT movement, Judith Butler types. I've had this debate with guys over in the IDW servers before. If you take this theory seriously, then nothing is off the table from deconstruction. But again,
no, the thing is, even though, and this, I seriously think that this is going to happen. I said sin seriously.
But again,
I seriously think that what is going to happen is the concept of deconstructing itself is going to be deconstructed. Like that's how bad it is.
Well, I think that that's an element of what postmodernism is. But again, we've gotten a little bit off the topic from Conservative Inc. I just want to I want to put a pin in that. Again, that's another interesting sub branch that we can go down.
I think that's going to be more fitting for the philosophy stream that I'm going to be starting here soon.
All right. Well, I would just we've touched on like the Ruther Memorandum and gay marriage and abortion and all these other issues. I would just write this sort of stuff down as ideas for future political pigpen shows and philosophy stuff. But just really quickly tying this back to Conservative Inc. I know our other two guests haven't gotten a chance to jump in.
Grayson, you got anything to add?
Yeah. Not really.
But okay, so Lacorum. So you're the Aussie here. I actually do want to ask, because this was something, especially when you guys were talking about immigration just a little bit ago, damnation and outtrimmer. So I was thinking, how similar is the condition in Australia in terms of the current health of the body social there, and also the optics that the parties are currently playing right there, and then also like with immigration in general, like for instance, what is their general position on that, both like from both parties?
Well, so Australia for a while has had a sort of immigration system, infamously like similar to Canada and New Zealand's immigration system.
The dangerous thing is it's right next to China too. So I mean, I'm literally afraid that like, and this I don't mean to sound like some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist or anything, because I know I'm going to sound like that, but I feel like eventually there could be like a silent invasion, basically.
Well, yeah, but so the immigration system is like a sort of points-based system where supposedly people that are most qualified are allowed into the country. A lot of people are let into the country, though, also on like family visas and stuff. Mm-hmm. So Australia actually has a really high rate of immigration, but it's, mainly skilled immigration. So it's like 300 or 350,000 people a year. I don't remember. I think it's like 300,000. And Australia's got a population of 25 million or so. So if you consider that, it's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
So no, but what about the parties? The Conservative Party, is it?
Yeah, no.
Okay, guy. Actually, I'll say this. I think this is probably a better way to say, or to bring up this next kind of thought I had. Is Conservative Inc. just an American concept, or is it actually is it a thing throughout the West? Some giant interconnected
there's various elements of it. The best way to think of conservative Inc. is that, and this is the best. It's not a conspiracy. It's not the globalists or the new world.
It's more cultural entropy.
Yeah, exactly. I tend to believe the best theory that I've heard on this is the idea of is again it's the sort of slow deconstruction over time of what were traditionally right-wing movements. It's the slow corruption of traditional institutions. It's the slow loss of a sense of patriotism and a loss of national identity. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of this stuff really picked up speed after World War II, but it's at various states and various countries because we have different political systems. I want to say Australia is a parliamentary system, so it's not going to manifest itself in exactly the same way, but you can definitely see the similarities.
Yeah.
You can see the similarities between someone like George W. Bush and who was the former Australian Prime Minister?
John Howard?
Say what?
John Howard?
Was it John Howard? I want to say it was
He
the one
around during like the Iraq War and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see the similarities between someone like David Cameron and a George Bush. You can see the similarities between someone like I forget who the former conservative prime minister for Canada was.
Stephen Harper.
Was it Stephen? I think it was Stephen Harper. Was it Stephen Harper? So again, it's a little bit different. It's like the gradients gets different if you get to someone like Nicolas Sarkozy or to in Central European countries, particularly as you get closer to Russia. But it's a similar phenomenon, just at different stages, and it manifests differently based on the political systems that we have.
Okay, so actually that brings me to another. So for the UK, you have, so I mean, at face value, the average person would look at the UK and be like, okay, Labour is the equivalent of the Democrats, and Conservative Party, the Tories are they're the equivalent of the Republicans. However, I have noticed something in the UK, especially, Labour isn't going anywhere. Like Labour's pretty much sterile. Like
Labour got their ass kicked when Jeremy Corbyn
no,
was.
but the thing is, no, but Labour had been going downhill for years before then.
Yes.
The thing is, it's not. I've noticed a lot of the stuff is happening in the Conservative Party right now. So, and with like the Lib Dems and the Conservative Party, especially, which there definitely is crossover. But I've noticed that. So they're both. I mean, both parties. Well, of course, like the Tories are economically more to the right, but then you also have a lot of left-wing social elements in it. Like even Boris Johnson, for example, who's always been very, very liberal on like immigration and abortion, that sort of thing.
Can I ask you a question? Can you define a little bit more accurately what you mean by sterile within the labor movement in the UK?
As in, it is unable. I don't even think it's able to reproduce it, like to continue.
Oh no, it's absolutely able to do that. There is a reason why the labor movement is protecting. I'm wondering how based we want to get here. Protecting certain religious communities in within.
Oh, we're going there. Oh boy!
Protecting that there is a reason why the grooming gang scandals have been covered up by the Labour
just
government.
Never talked about ever.
And well, if you do talk about it, there was that Labour politician who was driven out of the Labour Party for that. She was systematically hunted down and stripped of her position and pretty much thrown out of the party. I think she's part of the Lib Dems now, but the reason why they don't
aren't the Lib Dems? I thought they were like even more woke than the.
It's like you're. This is like.
I thought Lib Dems are basically.
This is the sort of California sort of thing where you're either left wing or you're even further to the left. If you're not a Jerry Brown, you're a Bernie Sanders.
Mark Gravel.
But like. So essentially, the Labour Party is playing much the same game. They're just doing it with groups that have absolutely no interest whatsoever in, I mean, what would these groups even have to assimilate to? Because you're dealing with countries that in many ways prior to the 20th century defined themselves. Part of their national identity, part of the national character of Britain was its history as a crusader state. I mean, how does
I don't really associate. So yeah, I know they were.
my dude?
They did go on
my
crusades,
dude,
but
who is the most famous king in
Richard the
medieval
Lionheart is like the most famous crusader.
And
But the thing is, no. But the thing is that when I think of a crusader state, I think of France.
Okay, I'm
especially.
not speaking.
Remember, Richard the Lionheart was really more
explicit. You're missing the point. I'm
Okay,
not
okay, I
speaking
get what you mean.
explicitly about the county of Edessa or the kingdom of Jerusalem. I'm not speaking explicitly about Outremer. But how does an immigrant from the Middle East who is an Orthodox, who follows an Orthodox version of their faith, identify with a country that has out in front of its government building a statue of arguably the most famous crusader of all time?
So are they going to tear it down?
Integral part of their national character.
And on top of that, we're gonna go one level above that. Also, the same country that gave the Catholic faith the middle finger, right?
Exactly.
Like it's one of those. Are you fucking kidding me?
My whole family. I haven't gone deep into my own family's history, but without doxing myself here, my own family's history is deeply defined by our opposition to Anglicanism. We would not have ended up in the American Revolution were it not for the fact that we were essentially Catholic recusants within the Anglosphere that basically got exiled from England. So how does a Catholic like myself identify? Well, don't get me wrong, the Anglican Church ain't what it used to be. I think the former Archbishop of Canterbury basically told the Anglicans to go convert to Catholicism.
Hey, well, at least maybe that could be the start of a dialogue, and you'll see.
I agree, and we can get, again, that's another interesting sub branch, is just like Christianity. But again, like the larger point is that this country has a very, very, it's not the United States, it's not tabula rasa. It is a very, very, very well defined identity going all the way back to the Roman Empire. And it might be multi-ethnic, but how do you essentially square that with a situation in which large numbers or large groups of people are being brought in for explicitly political purposes, and they have absolutely no reason to treat your country or your country's national identity with anything but contempt? I mean,
These are some great questions you're asking.
No, but okay,
fantastic fucking questions.
But taking this back to Conservative Inc., though,
well,
aren't Conservative Inc. like, I know they're not very. I know they're like you say, they're the quote unquote outer party to the left's inner party. That's your theory there. But what about Conservative Inc., who is, they're basically, so I mean, they're not just politics, of course. It's this giant fucking apparatus. But like, they're making cancel culture and fighting against like woke politics and fighting against the type of stuff that it seems like you're implying that they're complicit to. They're fighting against that same stuff.
Except they're not. They're not doing it honestly. I mean, I know you watched CancelCon, didn't you?
I did not. I was gonna. I think I want to make a video on it.
Okay, so cancel.
Should I pull up that video?
Okay, so yeah, you can go ahead and pull it up. But I mean, if you want to play the intro of it, you can go ahead and play that cringy animated. It's social justice. What? I mean, it's so fucking stupid.
Wait, I haven't heard about this.
Okay, you're gonna get ready.
You guys don't know what this was. This was a recent event where
like the Comic Con for conservatives.
Okay, so here's the background. The Groypers were going to go to this event. It was Adam Carolla, Dennis Prager, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, and I think one other guy. But the Groypers were going to go there, and they were basically going to ask some questions to these guys. My guess is that Conservative Inc., based on what I've heard coming out of the Republic, now it's been about a year or two since I've been active in the Republican Party, but I know for damn certain they are very well aware that there is an insurgent faction within their party that wants to ask difficult questions to conservative leadership that we know conservative leadership does not have an answer to. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the Groyper phenomenon. I tend to believe that we need to come about this from a more sober perspective, but I don't see any fucking like, if you're putting yourself out there as the great warriors of free speech, we'll take on anyone. You know what I mean? Like that's the debate me, bruh. If you're going to be coming at the left and all these fucking college students with that sort of stuff, okay, well, you've got members of your own party, members of the political right, further to the right than you are, who want to ask you very difficult questions. This is the whole Groyper phenomenon. But essentially what we saw was that conservatives came out and straight up lied about what the Groypers were. They called them white supremacists. They called them Wignats. They called them
Okay. To be fair, the Groypers, I do feel like you can. There definitely are some.
They're
at least
paleocons. They like.
I mean, there are some ethmat. Like for instance, Nick Fuentes, I'd argue, is a white nationalist.
Nick Fuentes talks about demographics. I actually don't think that he's a Wignat. He's actually gotten into it with Richard Spencer. This is like one of the big things that split the alt-right apart. When I was again, I've never been a part of that movement. Don't have any interest in it. But one of the big things that split that movement apart, and yeah, I know there's sort of like the difference is it's difficult to tell the gradients. But the thing with Nick Fuentes is that I think he's a paleocon who has the balls to talk about demographics. Now,
but then there's a difference between, like, for instance, Pat Buchanan and Nick Fuentes. I think
only in terms of their presentation.
Nick Fuentes is a lot more just vulgar.
I agree.
And
like
he's not. But like, whereas apparently I've met people who've met Pat Buchanan. They say he's a very pleasant person. Well, it's just Nick Fuentes just seems like a child.
Well, Politicrat, I'm not debating that point. What I'm debating is the accusation that he's a Wignat. I'm debating the accusation. Now, this is part of the reason I think the Groyper phenomenon. I like the fact that these questions are being posed to Con Inc. I don't I do agree. Posed. I think, like, I asked Ben Shapiro straight up on one of Dave Rubin's live streams 2 years ago a question similar to this stuff, although I didn't explicitly say it. I sort of asked him what his theories on, I didn't say demographics explicitly, but I did ask on one of Dave Rubin's live streams with Ben Shapiro, what is your opinion of these specific books, Clash of Civilizations and Balkans Ghosts? And Ben Shapiro said he straight up agreed with the theses of those books. Now, the entire theses of Robert Kaplan's Balkans Ghosts and Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations is that different groups tend to battle it out with each other, which would naturally lead you to the understanding that part of this issue is how do you essentially create coherent national identities with people who don't get along. But again, Ben Shapiro, but if you go in and you're just like demographics, immigration, smacking the thing on the table, that is going to put people off.
What I thought was fucking hilarious was when you had you basically had all of these they came up and they kept asking about the USS Liberty.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting conversation. Now,
I just thought it was funny because it became like a troll at one point.
And if you want to go down the rabbit hole of Israeli-U.S. history, it is a very controversial subject. But that the reason why they were not going to answer questions about the USS Liberty is because the Israel lobby in the United States plays a very significant role in conservative funding. Now, I don't think it's.
So, would you say that conservative? Would you say that? How big would you say Conservative Inc. is just as an apparatus? Because now that I'm thinking about it, I'm starting to make more connections to, for instance,
apparatus.
Israel. Yeah, because like I'm thinking like the Israel lobby, conservative parties in other countries.
Well, the Israel lobby is an interest group. It's not the only interest group.
No. I know. I'm talking about like, for instance, not the lot, but like I mean, there's definitely there'd be connections between.
But if you're saying this is to get back to the whole thing with AnthroCon, these guys are essentially spokesmen for special interest groups, like Dennis Prager at PragerU. What is his whole thing? He goes out there with a cigar.
The left is no longer The left
is no longer liberal, and they don't believe in the Constitution.
No, it's like and the left. No,
don't you understand?
The right
it means to be American is to believe in low tax rates.
And the right is called the right because we're right. So maybe we should start calling the left wrong. This is Dennis Prager.
Dennis Prager legit went out and said that cringy shit on stage.
Oh no! Did he say it exactly like that?
If you go through the comments, and again, like Politicrat, if you want to bring it up, we can watch the intro.
Yeah. No, I have it
There's
pulled up.
a
Yeah, I'll
there's
do it.
a just again the stream that I say everybody's got to go watch is Distributist's right-wing intervention stream that was just done about 2 weeks ago, where he
Okay.
responded to Don the Pleb.
I'm just kind of worried that like the average person is just gonna wander onto this stream and think it's like some kind of right-wing circle jerk.
Oh,
No, it's not. Like
No,
this
because
is essentially-
because I think it would be different if Matt weren't wearing the mug. The MAGA hat.
No, it's not. Like part of one of the reasons I really like this is because he actually breaks down. He's not sort of like hardcore on this stuff. No.
I appreciate the distributors. Like,
all right,
I
I'm
don't
gonna drop
necessarily
this.
agree with him on everything, but I mean, he's.
I'll drop this. I'll drop this into the private chat, and you guys can do with it what you want.
Yeah, but I hold on. Social justice warriors.
But like, just take a look at like the way in which they present this stuff. Like this is what I'm talking about. Like when you watch this, see if you can tell the difference between this and the kind of memes that were coming about naturally as a result of the populist movement back in 2015 and 2016. Like take a look at this and then compare this to and see if you can tell me what the difference is.
Okay. Hold on. Wait, was that the Simpson? What? That's weird. Okay.
The racist and biggest greatest nightmare. Social justice warriors. It's the bias response team. If you've been offended, your feelings must be defended.
What is this cringy shit?
They're like parodies of themselves at this point.
He's always ready to fight fascism with fascism. Starbucks windows don't stand a chance. Ethic enhancer. He's a systematic racism finder.
Oh God, that's actually kind of funny.
They win every debate by calling your names. They're heroes who think that they're victims. Social justice warriors.
It's like, okay, this would have been funny, like, right? Okay, so this would have been funny in 2014, right when that whole phenomenon was starting. Before
That's cringy ass shit.
it's exactly.
It's so I can put the finger straight on it. It's a product. That's all it is. It's totally inauthentic.
It's fucking manufactured.
And that's what I wanted.
totally
That's actually the
inauthentic.
next point I wanted
It's
to
not.
get to.
It's not an authentic expression.
They've
of what
milked
the people
that cow
feel.
so much.
Say what?
That's
They've just milked that cow so much. It used to be funny, but then you tell a joke over and over, and suddenly
This is one of the things that Conservative Inc. does because
guys,
they're not
guys,
plugged into
I'm
their
done.
base, because they're not plugged into what their people are actually thinking. They're always 1, 2, 3, or even 4 or 5 years behind, essentially pushing out this utterly conceited tripe. And yet they will openly spy on elements of their base that are populist. Because what was the whole point of CancelCon? The whole point of CancelCon is that they canceled the
Make
actual
money.
event, and then
fuck
they
bitches
hid.
make money.
Well, no, they like you saw that. Like they canceled the public event and then had it inside of Adam Carolla's garage with no. Q&A. Yeah, like go take a look at it. They had a Q&A section which was online and controlled, and they essentially hid inside of Adam Carolla's car garage so that they didn't have to answer difficult questions about the things that they support and the actual policies that they believe, and why they haven't essentially protected the freedom of expression that a lot of their base has been trying to push. Like, why did you essentially, on the one hand, claim to be the architects of this new Trumpian nationalist phenomena, but at the same time completely fuck your base over the last 4 years?
Exactly.
And they knew that these questions were going to be brought to them. So what they did was they essentially canceled the live event and ran off to Adam Carolla's garage and live streamed the event while putting out this stupid, cringy, animated shit that comes across as totally corporatized, totally manufactured, and totally inauthentic. Everyone can smell the BS on these people.
It was corporatized. I think that so that's actually what I wanted to move on to.
Like I can't tell you how many young conservatives, genuinely good people, Christian people, have gone to CPAC and they've seen the way these people behave afterwards, and they just come away completely black.
So let's move on to that next, because I know that you've sort of seen the true nature of like these, for instance, college Republican guys. But like I just wanted to address something else first. So I'm reading a book right now so what's funny is like the guy who wrote it, he really hates libertarians, but this is actually very insightful in terms of how it breaks down the left-right dichotomy. So the book is called The New Class War. It was written by some like strange kind of syncretic conservative, like sort of like a rogue neocon in a sense, I guess. But so he talks about how the whole left-right divide thing is more or less just a narrative that is perpetuated by the managerial elite to make it seem like the managerial elite is itself divided when it is
There was
not.
A guy.
The thing is, no,
exactly
because the
what this
thing
argument
is, it's not
There-
left versus right. It is actually the managerial class versus
It's the 80-20 divide. Yeah, I
No,
know
what it is-
exactly what this
it-
argument
it
is.
it is
There was
the,
this really
it's the
great
it's-
YouTuber called.
Well, hold on.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is the revolution of. It's basically a revolution of the elite versus the counter-revolution of the populists, which that's how he described it. I don't really at this point. I don't think you can really even. It's more like a chicken and the egg thing. I don't know. I don't think you can. I don't think it's clear which one is the revolutionary force or which one is the counter-revolutionary force. But either way,
it is to me. I mean, the easy question is this is the thing. It's not a question of whether it's the population versus the elites. This sort of globalist, internationalist, elitist class that believes that everybody can be liquidated into economic units and their nations, their cultures, their histories, their traditions, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of where they come from, regardless of who they are. These are essentially just anachronisms that need to be gotten rid of. And essentially these political parties that are put forward are just controlled opposition. Like that's not where the real question is. We have these people admitting that is what the project is. We have
the thing is, because the thing is, I've tried to. So,
what the real question is.
Well, hold on.
Hold on.
Let me-
Give me 1 second. Just put the real question out there. The real question is, who's the actual standard bearer of the quote unquote the people, of the polis? Who is actually a legitimate actor coming forward to try and represent the interests of these various groups that are having their livelihoods destroyed, and who is essentially just controlled opposition?
I know exactly. Yes, the answer is just yes.
And that's where the dialectic is. Now, I naturally tend to believe that you essentially, I don't like to quote Alex Jones a lot, but Alex Jones had this really great quote where he said, "You judge a man by
my llamas."
He had this really great quote back before he got nuked off the internet, where he said, "You judge a man by his enemies," and to me, the one faction that is completely anathematized, that is not astroturfed by any of the algorithms, that's not supported by. There are no billionaires giving us money.
Neo-Nazis.
Well, no, it's not. It's not the neo-Nazis. It's the dissident right. Like, it's the people who are outside of the Overton window. Any opposition force that is if your movement's being funded by the global elites, you're not a revolutionary force.
No, exactly. The thing is, though, too, also, and so this is where I would definitely expand upon what was his name? It was like his last name was like Lind or something. I forget. But anyway, so I'd expand on it and say, so you have all these different ideological groups. Like you have, let's say you have conservatives, you have liberals, you have progressives, you have libertarians and all this. So they're actually, I'd argue they're not actually distinct groups, but there are some who belong to the populists, and then there are some who belong to the managerial class.
Oh, absolutely. Like,
so for for instance, think of like
this is not a clear-cut battle. This is a Byzantine web of difficult, and part of the issue is that our information systems have become mendacious. They promote these false narratives, and it's very difficult to find out who is left, this is part of the reason I don't think there's going to be any kind of a return to the quote unquote center. There's no center to return to. We're in this sort of chaotic phase where everyone's trying to figure out who's on whose side, who's an ally, who's an enemy, who do we trust, who can we ally with. who supports what. And you can, I think what you're starting to see, and I know that Dan Crenshaw has mentioned this as well, although I suspect he's not going to end up on the same side or the barricades that I'm going to be.
I legitimately see Crenshaw as basically being I see him as most likely the heir to John McCain.
I can see that as well.
I can actually,
without going down that,
yeah.
again, that's another
Okay.
interesting rabbit hole that we can put a pin in. But
he's a good example of a conservative candidate.
He made this point that what we could potentially see going forward, we're not going to be able to tell where these battle lines are until maybe another 5 to 10 years. But we're starting to see this realignment take place. But part of the problem is that our system has become so mendacious that it's very, very difficult to tell what is true and what isn't. Like I just had this debate with my brother-in-law, he's very solidly on the left, but he's an intelligent leftist. He and I sort of came to the conclusion that we couldn't use statistics in our debate, because the way in which statistics, the way in which we were like quoting studies and the way in which we were like trying to bring up these statistics was creating this issue where we ended up questioning the validity of one another's studies. Like how is the study, it was like every time we would put a study on the table about this issue, we would go, oh, well, how is this study actually conducted?
Yeah, no, the thing is, and then no matter what, like one side, we've gotten to a point where like one side is going to completely still not going to like read or listen.
Chris Yarvin had a really great thing where he talked about like, would you trust a study that was done in the Soviet Union?
Of course.
Even if it was like declared by the Soviet Premier Brezhnev to be the ineluctable consequence of dialectical materialism, even if it had been cross-checked and backed unanimously by the entirety of the Politburo, even if it had been declared by Marxist philosophers across the world to be the natural result of the lumpen of class struggle,
No,
would you trust it?
The short answer is no, because we can basically prove that the entirety of Marxist-Leninist theoretical thinking is just.
You have a reason why you don't trust it, though, because you have an interest in essentially being against that ideology, and I don't disagree with it. But the critical thing is that it's a statistical study that you don't trust because of the information apparatus, because you know that system is mendacious.
I mean, for me, it's a little different. Like the reason I wouldn't trust that is for the same exact reason that I wouldn't trust the Huffington Post.
Well, I mean, no, it's not different. The point that I'm driving at is that both systems have become mendacious. I've told HuffPo writers that gave speeches at my university that I publicly, I thought that what HuffPo did was political slag, and that just gums up the system. But the fundamental issue is that it's very difficult to even have, like, you can't bring on someone like Ray Murasame. This is part of the reason I don't really want to talk with Lapis or Ray Murasame or President Sunday or any of these sort of newfound leftists that go on these internet live streams, because I know at a fundamental level that even in a professional scenario, even if you have like a timed debate where we're going back and forth, we're not fundamentally debating principle in any sort of honest or conversational sense. What we're essentially debating is interests, and what we're essentially debating is values. The
thing is, okay, yeah, I just wanted to bring us back on topic. Sorry for muting you right there. I was going to say this about 10 minutes ago, but we were just talking about, we can come back to this, but I just wanted to get to this point before ended up forgetting it. But so we were talking about how 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was completely different in terms of how just the movement that got Trump elected, just the Trump movement in general, especially, and you can see that also with the types of memes and stuff where it wasn't as corporatized. You don't have social justice warriors. you had like feels good, man. Like that's
it was a natural movement that
organic.
Arose.
And the thing is, but this is the thing. So the thing about this is the thing about populist revolts. They never work, and when they do work, they do not stay in power long. Because the thing is, the only people, so all of the famous politicians that you can name, basically when you think of like, okay, who are the leaders of the managerial class? You can think of people. But then when you say, okay, who's the leaders of like the populist class? Like you can't really think of anybody because that's the whole point. There
Sound
are no
really
actual
reactionary
leaders.
right now.
And then but then the thing is, but then there's only one way for populists to successfully kind of mount some kind, I don't want to say revolution, but
Influence.
start a movement, and that is when they have a leader, and usually it is somebody who has a lot of money.
Yeah,
That's the only
you
way.
have
It's
to-
somebody who has
the goal of any actual populist movement, the goal of any revolutionary movement, is to gain a conversation with elites who would be sympathetic and represent your interests within the aristocracy.
Yeah, and so
So
the
the
thing
fact
is,
of the
the thing
matter
is,
is-
okay, guys, let me finish. So,
All right.
the thing is, though, you saw that with, for instance, Publius Pulcher in the Roman Republic. Same with Crassus, who created the world's first fire department. That was
I
actually
mean,
brilliant.
same with Caesar.
Caesar. Caesar was like the culmination of like dozens of years of that.
Yeah,
But then the thing is, and then you also have, and then now you had Ross Perot back in the 90s, and now then we got Donald Trump finally, and so he managed to successfully get to that position. But the thing is, that never lasted, because the thing is, the managerial class is, and Conservative Inc. is part of the managerial class. They are one of its appendages. They are so strong, and they have so much control over, for instance, you have the Praetorians, aka I prefer to call them the Praetorians, but Trump calls them the deep state. But yeah, so they have control
Same
over
role.
that.
I mean,
But the thing
same-
is, they will eventually, once a populist leader gets in the power, even if it is whether they're actually a grassroots one or whether they're a rich person who came and like became a man of the people like Trump. So like eventually they get ensnared into the managerial class. That's
yeah,
what you
well,
see with
I mean,
Trump.
I would say
Well, I
that
would-
Trump ran as anti-establishment, and then over the past 4 years, he has become establishment.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say that Trump, in many ways, this is one of the depressing things that we sort of seen, is that this
He's been co-opted,
bureaucracy, the swamp is much more mendacious and much more powerful than anybody ever even
Right.
could have ever even believed.
Right.
I mean, it has not been idle over the last 75 years since these institutions really got formalized during the Roosevelt years. They've come to dominate every aspect of American life. This is the sort of core thing that I described. What is the core problem at the heart of American politics? The core problem at the heart of American politics is that these institutions that we can argue about whether they were ever effective, I think at one point they more or less fulfilled the function that they were established for. It's the software over the course of the last century has become malware. It's become maladaptive.
Sure.
And it's created for itself a firewall that prevents any kind of technician from coming in and fixing the system and actually getting
Right.
it to work in a sort of new or fresh or correct way. And
That's a fair
this is-
assessment.
this is the reason why it doesn't matter whether you come from the left or whether you come from the right with this stuff. And so people are now in this mentality where it's like, I don't care about America anymore. I just want to slash and burn.
They just want to win. No, the thing is, there's no nation anymore. The thing is, so originally, in terms of like unity, it was religion that held people together. That was the main system of organization. Then it became the king, and then it became the nation state, became nationalism, and now it's personality cults, more or less.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
I mean, it's
personal
but
factions in general.
the core issue remains the same. The core issue is that we're living in this sort of imperial system wherein these bureaucracies have become. Thomas Sowell, I mean, this is even kind of a Normicon talking point. Thomas Sowell wrote an entire book about this. The bureaucracies themselves they've become cancerous. They've become maladaptive, and there's very little that we can do, even at the presidential executive level, to try and arrest this stuff. Now, what we would want is I think that any populist movement, regardless of whether it comes from the left or regardless whether it comes from the right, if it's an honest populist movement, the goal needs to be finding some way of purging this software. And by purging the software, I don't care whether you have to remove certain bureaucracies. I don't care whether you have to remove certain institutions or whether you have to establish new ones. I don't care whether this means reforming them. But the point is to actually to clean out the gunk, to trim off the fat, to get rid of all the crap that's not working.
Can I get
But we
that
can't
in
do that because the bureaucracies themselves hold a massive amount of institutional power. This is the problem. It's the problem with living in late stage empires. If you were in the Ottoman Empire, the enforcers of the bureaucracies were the Janissaries. If you were in the Spanish Empire, it was the Escadrille. If you were living in the Roman Empire, it was the Praetorians. And if you're living in the American Empire, it's what we sort of colloquially refer to as the deep state, of which Conservative Inc. is an appendage. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to bring up this whole populism thing. Like one of the big populist presidents who I think could actually qualify for a real populist would be Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, he busted the trust. He empowered the unions. He made Senate elections. Actually, people could vote in Senate elections. And what happened to him? Well, I wouldn't say it was Taft's fault. Like Taft was just more moderate than he was. What really killed the Roosevelt populism was Wilson and the Republican split between moderates and populists or progressives at the time.
But here's the thing with Roosevelt, though. The thing is, his progressive reforms weren't because he was an ideological progressive. They were It was a means of pragmatism in order to prevent the rise of a true left-wing movement in the United States.
Yes.
Theodore Roosevelt is single-handedly the reason why we do not have a true left-wing movement in the United States, at least comparable to
what would have happened. To what would have happened in
basically
around the time that the Bolshevik Revolution happened.
And do you know who did the same exact thing? Otto von Bismarck.
Yeah.
So they created like Bismarck created the world's first social democracy or welfare state. So,
but even then, it's still an example of how you can still influence at least a ruling class to at least do some compromises. But then that went out the window with Wilson, and then FDR ran on his phony populism, which never actually worked, because the New Deal was probably a big disaster for America when you really look at how unemployment really went. It slowed down. It was the slowest recovery.
I find it funny how people just continue. I just find it funny people continue just clinging on to the narrative that the New Deal actually made things so much better.
Yeah,
you can argue whether or not the New Deal.
It gave people hope.
I think okay. So I'm not like a BoomerCon. I'm not going to shit all over. I think if you go back and you look at what the Roosevelt, I won't say I've called it the dictatorship because I believe you can legitimately describe Roosevelt as an autocrat. But if you look at
concentration, he had concentration camps.
If you look at what the Roosevelt administration was dealing with in the 30s and the 40s, I mean, you were looking at a situation of national dissolution. You were looking at a major, we were in straight up revolution, Bolshevik, socialist, destroy the United States sort of territory.
So it was basically It was basically Caesarism as a means to counteract decline.
And the sort of recognition, I think, was that after World War II, these institutions were going to, it was very obvious even by 43, after the U.S. led the Allies to victory through its manufacturing base, that it was going to emerge as a major world power, whether it liked it or not. Yeah. You can make the argument that the New Deal argument, the smart argument that the neocons should be making is that we didn't really have a choice. We were going to have to essentially decide whether to abandon Europe to the Soviet Union or whether to engage in a truly global imperial struggle for the fate of the world. I mean, that's not hyperbole. That's not being dramatic. You're
absolutely correct.
You could make the argument, and in order to do that, you're going to in state-based politics, you can hate it, you can scream against it, you can say it's not fair. You're going to need an empire. And if you have an empire, you're going to need a deep state to keep everybody on the same page.
Exactly. Like, for instance, what if you had a? So I know Donald Trump was totally just trolling when he said I might not leave office. Like, he was like, can we agree he was not being serious? He was trolling.
He's a joker.
No. But
he's a funny man.
Oh yeah,
Donald
he's
Trump's
fucking
legitimately
fucking
a funny fucking man. He's a comedian, but by
Yeah.
trade.
He's an entertainer.
Yeah,
so-
yeah.
No, but the thing is, the one thing he can't laugh at is himself, but he can laugh at anything else.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he has he's a bit of a snowflake, but he's funny.
I have seen some self-deprecating remarks from Trump, but not many.
Yeah. No, but anyway, so so he said, like, oh yeah, I wouldn't leave, but the thing is, that's not possible. The thing is, the true power, the true monopoly on violence is with the quote-unquote deep state, or what I'll call the Praetorians. Because the thing is, if Donald Trump refuses to leave office, what's going to happen?
They're going to come and get him.
The Secret Service, their one job, their duty is not to the president, it is to the country. They are protecting the country by protecting the president.
We're getting,
however, when the president does something bad.
Hold on.
Can I put something forward real quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to. Does Lacorum? He's been quiet for a little while. Does he want to get on any of this? I just wanted to make sure it's not just.
Yeah,
No, that's fine.
just speak up, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, all right, you're good. All right.
Yeah.
Just to sort of like put a pin in this. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in a month. But again, that's another interesting discussion that we can go down maybe next week or at another pig pen. I hope you're writing all this stuff down, Politicrat. Just like making notes of interesting.
Oh no! I know that's why I'm being like silent.
Okay,
like a little bit. Give me so many. It's giving me so many high level important ideas.
Yeah, just like is there anything else that you wanted to cover on Con Inc? Or,
yes, there were quite a few things that or not quite a few. I think let's go for another 30 minutes. You guys good for that? Another half hour?
Yeah.
I gotta hop out of here though. So.
Okay, you sure? How long do you have?
Me personally, I probably should have been gone like 15 minutes ago, but
I can give you another 15 minutes if you want.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
I can do another 15.
Okay.
Cut it out. We'll go out. I got to cut out at the live stream around the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, what I was saying in terms of conservative Inc. I wanted to talk about their spokespeople.
Sure.
That's a big thing.
So what, like Dennis Prager and
Charlie Kirk?
Hold on. I'm trying. I need to find like a. Hold on. I know. I just need to find like a good graphic. Yeah, no, I can't find. God, I was trying to find a picture of all of them together, but I'll just do this. I could not. Like, I literally Googled Prager, Kirk, Owens, Rubin. But yeah, no. So anyway,
be careful doing that because you find some things you don't want to see.
You'll find some Rule 34 shit probably.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway. So what do you think of these guys? Do you think that they're sincere actors, or do you think that they're just? So do you think they actually? So because I feel like
Kirk, I will go on record saying I don't believe that Charlie Kirk is a sincere. Well,
I think he's sincere. I just think he's a moron.
Yeah.
I don't like the way he presents his arguments. I don't like the
Dude, he
points
he got my first Twitter account banned. He got me banned off Twitter.
I've been involved with the party in the past. I've seen these. I've met most of these folks at CPAC for 2 years. I've seen a lot of good people come into the. Okay, so the way the conservative movement, the spokesheads are politicians. They'll lie. They'll obfuscate. This is the court. This is a political movement. This isn't an idealistic movement. People need to understand that first and foremost. It might have ideals baked into it, and those ideals may not be what's being sold to the public. But it is a political movement.
Yeah, that's the thing with that's why it's always been. That's what I think the Libertarians and the Republican Party don't understand, and that's what the the
Oh no, I think the
the
Republican Party
progressive.
understand. I think
No,
don't
the
think
the progressives in the Democratic Party don't understand that either.
the Democratic Party realizes that at an instinctive level. The Republican base doesn't understand that. I didn't understand that. Like, I knew I was going to deal with some Game of Thrones stuff. I didn't think I was going to see it so quickly. So there are a lot of good people who go into these, idealistic young kids. They've been raised the right way. They've gone to church. They believe in God. They're still Christian, despite the entire culture telling them that that's a false worldview and that they need to abandon it and embrace post-1960s sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture. They still believe in it. And I've seen a lot of good folks come into this system wherein essentially the core leadership of these movements is made up of what I would call political nobility. So they're the sons, daughters, cousins whose uncle, father-in-law, whatever, is a politician in whatever county, state, municipal government that they're a part of. They're connected to the system. That's what I'm saying. These are the kinds of people who get
So
promoted.
lesser nobility.
Yeah, they're connected to the system and they're aspiring nobles. They're the sort of, and generally speaking, these people have quote unquote moral credentials. So they might have come out of Catholic school. My own personal read on them is that they don't actually believe in any of this crap. They're the type of people who would go to Burning Man. They're the type of people who behind closed doors, they're all on board with drug culture. Now you do find exceptions. Ben Shapiro is one. I think he generally is an Orthodox Jew and he does practice his religion.
Yeah, no, that's the thing with that's why I respect him more than I respect Gabe Rubin, because at least he has principles.
But
They're terrible principles, but still.
The majority, the majority of the kinds of people who make it into the higher echelons of these power positions are, let us say, morally deficient. And part of being a right winger is that you pick up on that. And so one of the more depressing things I saw when I was in was I saw a lot of young idealistic people come into these movements, come into these college Republican clubs, even come into Turning Point USA, TPUSA, it's grassroots movement.
No, it's not. It's
okay,
totally
I'll give you, well, hold on. Before we completely bash TPUSA, let me give you a quick story. And I'll try and keep it to a minute. So there was this young Hispanic woman who she was, Latino, family moved to the United States, second generation immigrant, totally believed in, America, Constitution, all that sort of stuff. Normie Khan talking points. But she also understood at a fundamental level that there was a different dialectic going on at universities. Now, she worked long and hard for a year to get a TPUSA event going on at my university. This is my senior year. Now, I knew exactly what was going to happen at my university when this event occurred. The Black Student Union is an incredibly powerful organization on campus, and they have an ant smell about this sort of stuff. So I knew the moment that this thing was put on, they and other progressive organizations were going to lightning rod this thing, and they were going to do exactly what they do at all the other events. They were going to come to this event, they were going to scream, they were going to shout, they were going to dox everybody at the event, and they were going to call everybody racist. And that's exactly what they did. And this young Hispanic woman, is not used to this. It's very intimidating when you have 20 or 30 other students show up, shove a camera in your face, and announce to the entirety of the 20,000 person campus that this person is basically an enemy of the state and needs to be burned at the stake. And she practically broke down in tears. Like she sort of like left out quietly while the event went on. But
was she conservative?
Yeah, she was. Well, she was sort of conservative libertarian. You know what I mean? But yeah. She was not a bad person. And that is the general modus operandi that I've seen over and over and over again. It's young, idealistic people on the ground trying to have basic conversations with fanatics within the political left. Now, I was pretty nihilistic at this point because were you still like a Nietzschean? Well, I was still Nietzschean. I hadn't gone back to, I hadn't become Christian, but
To be fair, I still think I think you could reconcile the two in some regards, but that's
Yes, you can, but in a very specific way. But
Yeah.
that's another conversation. But this is the sort of model that I would see. You would have these incredibly idealistic activists. Some of them would, they might run for your state position. I met a lot of these people. I canvassed for a lot of these candidates. They were genuine believers in American exceptionalism. They were generally intelligent. They were generally patriotic. They're good people. And even on the Democratic side, I have to say, I met most of the candidates that ran for the Democratic National. Don't get me wrong, the people who ran for president, those people are career politicians. They're corrupt at core. But as an extension, you encounter the sort of grassroots Democratic Party politicians. They're not that bad. They're run-of-the-mill progressives and neoliberals, but they're not, party men. It's what you run into with figures like the spokesman, the sort of I would say that the heads of these professionalized movements is they have talking points, they have paymasters, they have sponsors, they are appendages that if you speak out against these, you're putting a lot of your money on the line.
These are like the modern day equivalent of like royal families.
Yeah. I say that it's a patronage network.
Yeah.
If Charlie Kirk comes out tomorrow, and I know he mentioned 650, but if he comes out and starts explicitly talking about 650, his neck's on the line. And there are a neoconservative wing of the party. I mean, this is going to sound ridiculous, but the neoconservative wing of Conservative Inc. considers TPUSA to be a white nationalist movement. Like, this is an actual talking point that I heard.
Yeah, that's absurd.
They don't actually think that. They just want to know.
No, I'm not even kidding.
It's out. No, I don't doubt.
Outrimer,
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt you at all, because
I think he's right. Actually, yeah.
No. Charlie Kirk is an incendiary asshole, right? Like out of this side, like Donald Trump. He's not.
But like they
right
straight up, I heard, guys generally in our age bracket, millennials and Zoomers, who are plugged into the sort of royalty. Their dad's father is a state senator. Openly describe TPUSA as a white nationalist movement. And these are people who self-identify as paleocons.
That's
so
absurd.
like
I don't want him to. I don't care about that.
That's like that is top tier BoomerCon shit.
Well, it is like
BoomerCon versus BoomerCon.
These people are, particularly the royalty. It's a patronage network. They're not keen on allowing people who are not going to be loyal to the party line into the higher echelons of political power. And quite frankly, they're generally not very intelligent. They don't seem to know. My own read on the sort of people who dish out the dough is that it's like a gallanter system. It's a guild system. You have to prove your loyalty before you're allowed to advance to higher echelons and get the sponsorships that are going to let you astroturf a campaign at the national.
You have to be a made man.
Exactly. You got to be a made man.
I do know even with Trump, there have been a lot of these conservative Inc. people who have gotten into his administration, like Kushner and especially Larry Kudlow, I think it is.
Well, Larry Kudlow is basically, he's a liberal, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna ask now, who is and who isn't part of Conservative Inc. That's the thing. That's where Donald Trump at this point, I'd say that he has been co-opted by Conservative Inc. So I think
but they still want him gone because of what he represents. He represents, as a force, just in his own person, the ability to get past the narrative. Like, he is a cultural symbol of what was basically a successful peasant revolution in the United States.
Yep.
And they hate him for that. Now, I agree with you. He's largely gone over to the policy positions of the nobility, but what he represents is important. What his cultural iconography, he is, the representation of, quote unquote, and I know this is going to sound cringy, the people. It's the same reason that the neoliberal wing of the Democratic Party hates Bernie Sanders, because they are representatives of an ideology that is not their own, regardless of whether they get subverted or not. That's important.
But the thing is, even Bernie, have you noticed that there's a big difference between 2016 Bernie and 2020 Bernie?
Yes.
You're not going to.
You're absolutely 100% correct, and I was the one that noticed that like a year and a half to 2 years ago, right? Which was why I switched from being a Bernie Sanders supporter to being Donald Trump, and it was because the tilt of his rhetoric started to lean heavily more into the racial identitarian bullshit. And I'm like, no, fuck that nonsense. Like, your idea of left-wing populism, I agree with in the idea that on some of those issues, right? And I believe that like some of the extremely radical ideas that Bernie Sanders proposed would be like kind of like curtailed by like the rest of it. It's like, no, he's just a kook. We're not going to listen to him on that. But the things that he actually is correct on, we're going to like work towards getting him. And then like this last few times I was like this last like from like 2017, 18 and 19 and watching his rhetoric shift, I was like, they got to him. They fucking got to him. And his rhetoric shifted into racial identitarianism. I was like, no.
It sort of it shifted into the sort of woke insanity.
Yep,
like,
exactly.
But again, there's reasons for that. But
because
I
it works.
mean, like I'm saying, like, now I don't think Bernie Sanders. Well, I won't speak on Bernie Sanders. I've met the guy briefly, but essentially what you've got is this sort of guild system. That's the best way to think about it. It's you said it best, Politicrat. You got to be a made man in order to make it.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that there's not good people in the party. That doesn't mean that there's not good people at the activist side. I mean, I think I've told you the story about, I knew this chick in the opposite campaign. A lot of guys wanted me to go ask her out, but this is the sort of thing that you deal with. It's a tight-knit circle. It's very guild-based. It's very political. You've got to show proper loyalty. And a lot of the times, the people who sort of control the choke point of sponsorship and political power they don't get there because they're bright or because they're smart or because they're knowledgeable about the Constitution or about the history of the country. They get there because of loyalty. They get there.
They're good at playing the game.
Yeah.
But the thing is also, I think what we were talking about, the phenomenon with like basically people getting hijacked by the establishment. You see that with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez too. Remember how she showed up in Washington and she was like, just like protesting outside of Pelosi's office, like she was just grandstanding and everything. And then now she votes with Pelosi on like almost every single issue and gets corporate money.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the challenges. Like, how
I honestly, I don't think she's like super smart or anything, but I don't think she is a bad person.
I think fundamentally what happened is that they got a taste of the good life, and they recognized. I think they got a taste of the kind of butter you can enjoy when you make it into these. It's basically like winning. It's like winning the lottery.
She's so glad she's never going to have to work at a bar again.
Oh yeah, like she's a good looking young Latina woman. I mean, and she's got a boyfriend. She's got a. I mean, this is like the kind of moral character that you need to resist the temptation. Like the guy who really. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to mention it. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But let's just say that there were guys who over the last 3 years really sort of busted open just how much butter is involved in this system when you make it. And you're just like, just the kind of temptations you would have to resist in order to not betray your political base.
Power begets power.
Oh my! It's like
it's not even that. It's like you're asking somebody who would effectively have to be God themselves, and like morally incorruptible, to be able to go in there and resist the temptation of someone sliding $1 million into your pocket. Right?
Well, I mean, it's totally legal. Like the ability to really make it, to take the money and essentially be a part of the 1% of the 1% of the country, to be plugged into these networks.
The 1%.
Well, I know it's a talking point, but again, like Distributist, the reason why I dropped this in there is because Distributist talks about this. He talks about this is power, man. Like this is how you wheel and deal political power in an international system. You promise low status people high status. And I mean, unless you're like totally devoted to Jesus, it's going to be very, very difficult not to want to get a taste of that.
Well, there is the one representative I would say that hasn't been as corrupted would probably be Gabbard. She definitely
Oh,
goes
but
against.
you know what that is, right? It's
Yeah.
because it's because Gabbard has a blood connection to a lot of her policy positions. The reason she hates Saudi Arabia is because of the Kashmir situation, and she
Yep.
herself is a Sikh, or she's descended from Hindu Sikhs. She is also she comes out of the military. She has a very, very powerful connection to the idea of America as this nationalistic nation. Now, I think she interprets it in a progressive sense, but she I mean, part of the reason why she hasn't essentially stabbed a lot of that in the back, but also part of the reason the establishment would never support her is because they know that she's one of these candidates that's going to be very, very difficult to seduce. She's got connections. She's got an almost she's got an I'm trying to find an appropriate way that'll get past the YouTube censors. Let us just say she has a very, very strong loyalty code to the idea, to her conception of the United States. To a certain degree, I think Dan Crenshaw also has that, but that's part of the reason. You can argue that Trey Gowdy has that. You can argue there are other Democratic Party candidates.
But you cannot argue that Hillary Clinton has it.
Well,
Correct.
yeah, no.
Correct. Right, because and that's actually kind of
She's a dollar snatcher.
No, absolutely.
I tell you, that's actually why I voted for
Hold on,
Clinton.
let me finish my point. Let me finish my point, and then you can jump in after this. That Outrimer brings up a fantastic point, right? Is that you look at Dan Crenshaw, you look at Tulsi Gabbard, Trey Gowdy, and they have these concepts of what the United States and the U.S. nationalism and U.S. exceptionalism exist, right? And at least there is a connection there of some sort of ground that you can build a bridge. There's going to be different points on the bridge, right? Like Tulsi's going to be further left, Dan's going to be further right, and then and within there. But they still agree on a core concept of, no, America's pretty fucking good, right?
You can also expand that to Andrew Yang and Ron Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you can Andrew Yang. I think Andrew Yang a little bit less so, but he
Really?
is.
I think Yang and Gabbard are about on the same level.
But Yang and Paul and Gabbard and Crenshaw, regardless of where they are on the spectrum, they think that there is a thing foundational about the United. They disagree on what it is, but they do agree that there is a thing called the United States. It is foundational, and it isn't just this sort of global bazaar, this global marketplace.
They see it as an organism, whereas people like Clinton and Harris, they see it as a system.
Well, it's not even that they see it as a system; they see it as a piggy bank, and it's one of these. They see it as an ocean of butter that you can jump into and just lather yourself with.
So next question, just so we can start wrapping this up, would you say there is a Democrat equivalent to Conservative Inc., or would you say they don't even need to have one?
I would say that they don't even need to have one because they're the inner party. Okay. This is one of the big things is there a Democratic equivalent of CPAC? No, there isn't. You can maybe argue that the DNC is that, but or like the National Convention, but I would say that doesn't really count. I would say that the Democratic Party exists almost purely in terms of a vast international, or well, really it is international, but at the very least a national network of activist institutions, state-run campaign. It's a decentralized network of highly connected, of highly networked and highly connected interest groups, activist coalitions, interfaith coalition groups in the inner cities, and it operates
even churches.
And churches and religious institutions. That's where the whole interfaith coalition stuff comes from, and it operates very smoothly. I mean, the machine works regardless of what its parts are thinking.
And the thing is also, though, at the same time, this theory makes sense, I think, but the one part where it falls flat is Conservative Inc. and the Democrats have, like the mainstream Democrats, they have a lot of shared interests in mind, primarily economic and primarily lining their own pockets and being the dollar snatchers they are. But the thing is also at the same time, if they're working in tandem, but then Conservative Inc. has all of these other elements to it, like the whole Candace Owens who talks about how like Biden is a social, and anybody to the right of Ted Cruz or anybody to the left of Ted Cruz is a socialist, and just all that sort of stuff like that. That almost kind of, because they're damaging to the Democratic Party in some ways.
The best way to think about it.
I think it's kind of conspiratorial if you go.
This is there's different factions of elites that are competing with each other. But now you have populist elements of the middle and lower class.
You have a populist elite now.
You have it. Well, it's not just, you've got the Game of Thrones, you've got the Starks battling it out with the Lannisters, and you also have populist elements from the middle and lower class, essentially saying that, hey, your War of the Five Kings is making our lives a living hell. Can we get a little bit of relief down here? Can there be a little bit less raping and pillaging?
And hold on, let me finish my meme. So, and then basically we're the ones that are like the hound saying "fuck the king."
But I was about to say that it seems like there are really two types of populists, and with one they're easily absorbed into the main party. It's like, okay, we'll try to do what you want to do, not really, but we'll say we'll do it. And then there's the type of uncompromising populists, like the
opportunists and the believers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trump is an opportunist, whereas I think Trump is an opportunist, whereas I legitimately do think Sanders is a believer. But the thing is, the reason he was able to get co-opted is because he's just like so fucking old and really doesn't give a shit anymore, but feels guilty.
It really just comes, like, a lot of this stuff is not simple. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was the one who said that the line between good and evil runs between every human heart. You can go into the movement as an idealist, but you're going to ask serious questions about yourself when you see it, just how many problems there are within the system itself and how much money you can make by just cashing out. Like, think of it, this is another reactionary idea, but think of it like a corporation that's going bankrupt.
Conservative Inc. going bankrupt, finally?
Well, it's just America going bankrupt. But like, think of it as a corporation going bankrupt. Do you really want to actually fight to keep this thing going, or to salvage?
No, you want to liquidate it or sell it off.
If it's late 2007,
to a private equity firm.
If it's late 2007 and you get made the CEO of Lehman Brothers, do you really want to fight to try and keep Lehman Brothers above ground, or do you want to try and enrich yourself, get as much money as you can, and then scoot out the door, but and leave somebody else holding the grenade or the bag of shit?
Exactly.
I'm gonna do.
That's what you had towards the end of the Roman Empire.
I'm gonna do two things, right? If I'm the CEO of Lehman Brothers, I'm going to short the housing market, and then I'm going to take my golden parachute and fuck off.
Yeah, it takes a tremendous amount, and this stuff is not clear cut. There can be people who do both. They can, on the one hand, they want their golden parachute. On the other hand, they still kind of want to help the people. Yeah. So it's a Byzantine network. It's difficult to figure out. I do have to jump out here because we're about 10 minutes over.
I actually do have one more. I do have one more question for you.
All right, just put it out there, and we'll try and wrap it up quick.
Okay, so I would say, where do you think libertarians fit into all of this? Because that's what's hard. Because the thing is, you see people like there are like legacy think tanks like the Cato Institute, which does legitimately
the libertarian movement.
And you also have Ron Paul, who's definitely like more populistic. Then Rand Paul, who seems like he's been hijacked by the establishment.
The libertarian movement is irrelevant. Post 2000, I think the last breath of the libertarian movement was probably Ron Paul, who was also simultaneously the last breath of genuine, honest belief in liberty, federalism, and constitutionalism. In this idea that we could vote our way out of a lot of the issues that we have in America today.
He still does it too.
He still does, and
he's just like, he's not going to go gentle into that.
I know, and I respect the hell out of the guy. Say prayers for him. He had that stroke the other day.
I was so scared.
But like, he's incredibly
greatest politician of my lifetime.
He's a good man. But the libertarian movement, the problem with them is that post 2012. There's I forget, Christopher Caldwell, I think, wrote the book The Age of Entitlement.
Yeah. I work around books, so yeah.
The post 2012, the libertarian movement was confronted with the epistemological question of the culture war. Basically, if you can use culture war politics to mold the dialectic optically in such a way in which it becomes in which the audience is in which you can make bad policy decisions that nevertheless support you in the next election. This completely destroys the idea that you can decouple people's lifestyle choices from the way in which politics actually plays out. In other words, this sort of don't be an asshole philosophy, sort of like you do me, don't tread on me, bruh. Don't tread on me, bruh. That sort of philosophy completely goes out the window. So I'll give you an example. Drugs. What do you do if you're a libertarian? You're almost always in favor of drug legalization. Now, I think Charlie Kirk's actually a libertarian. He had a debate with Tucker Carlson on this point, which I highly recommend everybody go look up.
Tucker Carlson's for legalizing marijuana.
No, he's actually not. At least not in this debate, he wasn't. I don't know what his position is now, but he had a debate with Charlie Kirk about a year ago. Drug legalization. You may be strong enough to not smoke pot, but what are you going to do about the millions upon millions of people who go full hardcore into, not just marijuana, but cocaine, heroin, all that other stuff?
The thing is, that's actually going to go down when it's more widely accessed.
That's not even. That's not, well.
And what are you going to do about all those people? And then they become, and so you support small government, but all these millions upon millions of people then become government dependents. And
I support local.
This generation, they're going to become government dependents next generation because of drug use. So I'm sorry.
No, the answer to that is you have to look them right in the eye and tell them, fuck off. You have to be willing to let them shoot themselves into it, like literally shoot themselves out of the problem.
Now here's the issue. They still vote. Right. So immediately what you have.
Well, no. Actually, I'd say that they don't care enough to vote. They just want to do drugs.
I know a lot of them do vote.
Okay, no, I know a lot of drug addicts.
We're talking about the larger coalitions that make up the communities that suffer from drug addiction. And those communities vote. And they are going to vote for government subsidies. So immediately you're
classic public choice. Yeah.
You're immediately this is like the sort of thing that a lot of libertarian guys like Jeff Dice are starting to come around on, is they're recognizing that you cannot decouple lifestyle choices from politics. And that immediately lends itself to either social conservatism as a buffer, which means you have to agree that separation of church and state, at the very least, is a flawed principle, or you immediately have to start asking hard questions about natural philosophy.
I would not go that far.
I wouldn't go that. I don't Aquinas, for instance, I don't want to go down these rabbit holes again. But immediately, the libertarian movement is confronted with very hard questions about the culture war, about power. And the problem that they have in the culture war, even though they want small government, is that they agree epistemologically with the progressive left.
Yeah.
And they haven't been able to square that circle in the last 4 or 5 years. And so fundamentally,
that's why I think we need, and you see, the thing is, so I guess I'm bringing it back to Hegel real quick, because the thing is with Hegel, so he was too deterministic in his view. And the thing is, the result of his dialectic has fucked up so many times. For instance, you have, even on a small level, like for instance, you have Stephen Miller, who's basically the result of a botched Hegelian dialectic between Judaism and Nazism. But anyway, I think that there sort of has to be some kind of synthesis with not just two elements, but multiple elements of the culture for a new form of libertarianism to work. Like, for instance, I think
I wouldn't just say libertarianism. I would say liberalism as a political philosophy.
Yeah. I'd say there has to be more I think it has to be more pluralistic.
It's very, very obvious that liberalism, at least here in the States, is not going to be of the same, if it survives at all, it's not going to be of the same type that it was in the 20th century. We are not going to live in the same kind of quote unquote American liberal nation that our parents in 1963 were living in.
I don't know. I unironically, I think
Those days are
Starship.
gone. Those days are. I think George Freeman was ironically enough, the military theorist. He spoke about this not too long ago. That age more or less came to a conclusion in 2008.
I'd say 2001.
2008,
I'd say with
1945 to 2008 was a hell of a party. It got really, really awesome between 92 and 2008.
That was high noon
Yeah,
for the Empire.
But that party's over. It's done. Now we move on.
We're the breakdown.
So what? Sooner or later, the boomers are going to be gone, and millennials and Zoomers, our generation is going to have to ask very serious questions about what we want this thing to be. Our parents are not going to live for much longer, and we're going to be left with this, and it's not going to be the country that our parents inherited from the greatest generation. That's going to be an interesting conversation if we
life has changed. We need to adapt to that. We just need to.
Well, I mean, we're going to have to again, but we can't even have that conversation because of the dialectic so far. But hopefully, what we're going to be able to get in the next couple of years is the space by which to, at least for myself, that's what I want to see. I want to actually begin that process. I want to actually see that conversation get opened up.
Yeah, same here.
Starts with
I think that I believe I do think that compromise is possible. Like, I mean, I'm essentially an Aristotelian. There is a mean between two extremes, and that is the virtuous way.
Yes, the first step is Aristotelian virtue ethics. Number one.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, the thing is, so that's why my ideal political system has always used Aristotle's polity as a model. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go.
I've got to bail out here. But
okay.
But it's
I think we should all.
Yeah, this is a good. This is a good stopping point.
Yeah, I was about to say. So everybody, let's do like a final closing comment. Let's start with you, Grayson.
Well, you didn't hear from me much tonight, but I did learn a lot from this conversation, and it definitely knows that I have definitely not read many books. Because
I've read too many books.
I don't have philosophy books.
Okay.
I still have a trigonometry book on my bookshelf. That's how.
Is it a trigonometry book?
Trigonometry.
Stop talking about math. Yeah. Math is racist.
Yeah, it is.
So am I.
It's colonial. Anyway, okay. So Lacorum. You have any last word? Do you have any final words to say before we log off?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, obviously I didn't get to say much either, really. I don't know.
That's it. Okay. Damnation.
So when we're talking about the conservative boomers or conservative boomer Inc., right? I think there is a fundamental conversation that needs to be had about what direction the conservative movement looks like, what is the idea that it needs to work towards, because the alternative is we start going towards the socialist route, and better dead than red, period.
Yeah, brother. Long live the 56.
Okay, and finally, Outrimmer.
Oh man, I've more or less said my piece tonight. I'll leave it on short words.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening in. I think that this was a pretty good conversation. I mean, yeah, we did get off topic a little bit, but I think we did really good this time, kind of trying to bring everything back, somehow connecting it to the major topic of a conservative boomer incorporated. And I was hoping we could like watch a PragerU video for shits and giggles, but we didn't have time to do that. But anyway, yeah,
we'll do it another night.
We'll do it another night.
A lot of interesting ideas down. So
when we
anyway,
have booze.
So yeah, no, but again, thanks everybody who listened in, watched, of course, stuck with us the whole time. If any of you have, please give me a like, a subscribe. Yeah, I could really use the subscriptions if you're not subscribed yet, because I mean, I've still been having a little bit of trouble building the channel up because I suck at networking, and I'm also lazy.
Subscribe to my man.
What?
It's got to buy those Russian bots, dude.
Yeah.
You gotta call.
I gotta collude with Putin.
No. You just got to call the. Here's what it is. That American company that figured out how the Russian bots worked. You got to pay those guys. You got to use your political opposition to.
No, I got to use Shadow Inc. Shadow Inc.
Yep.
Pete Buttigieg's
That's the
company.
one. That's the one I was talking about. Shadow Inc. That's the. Oh, it was that that Buddha butt giggers
Butt chug
company,
Pete
right?
Butt chug.
Yeah, Pete butt chuggers. Yeah.
You also got to subscribe to my channel.
And also subscribe to Damnation's OnlyFans. Everybody.
I don't have an
Consider it.
OnlyFans that I will share with anybody. But everybody should subscribe to PewDiePie.
Yeah, subscribe to PewDiePie.
But
guys.
yeah, we still got to beat T-Series somehow.
All right. So good night, everybody.
Peace.